Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
The camera. Don't forget
camera?
about the camera.
Warning, this show may be triggering for anybody experiencing gambling-related harm. Please watch cautiously. We speak from our experiences only. Please seek professional help for a gambling addiction.
Hey, everyone. I'm Christina. I have a place to bet since March of 2021, and this is the Bet Free Life.
And I'm Brian, and I have not placed a bet since July of 2014. Christina, how was your week in recovery?
I had a pretty good week. I started some meetings in the Broke Girl Society Facebook group, and those have been really, really good. And it's something I'm really, really proud I started doing them. I kind of struggled with the idea of doing something like that, but I'm glad I did. They've been really great to start my week. And I think that might be why I had a good week.
That's good.
Started with positivity and food for thought and all that kind of good stuff. So how was your week?
Cool. It was good. I realized today I recorded 2 podcasts today, and then I looked at the remaining ones that I have scheduled. I had 13 more scheduled between January and February. So I was like, whoa, cool. Lots of good stuff coming up on the podcast. But tonight we have a guest today with lived experience, a recovering compulsive gambler herself. She is the co-host of the Gambling Got the Girls podcast. She's a wonderful human being, and she has so much to say about recovery. Danielle H. from South Jersey is here to talk about gambling and recovery. Danielle, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Danielle, would you tell everybody about your gambling and how you found recovery?
Sure. So, little history. I started gambling at the end of 2015 because I broke my ankle and I was bored. I was out of work. I'm in the healthcare field, so I am used to helping people, and not being able to help anyone, I felt kind of helpless. And so I decided to do a little bit of online gambling. I hated the casino. You will never hear me say that I enjoyed the casino. It was too overwhelming and overstimulating for me. But being on the computer was easy. I didn't have to go anywhere. I could sit in bed and gamble. And it was very small in the beginning. It was small increments. And then my grandma passed away in December of 2016. And that's when it started to get worse. And things just kind of progressed from there. I started probably gambling a few times a week on my phone by the middle of 2017. And then actually I won money, which they say is like some of the worst thing that you could do for a compulsive gambler is win. And I thought it was my grandma going up there going, okay, I got you your money back. Now let's stop. And it wasn't an insane amount, but it was enough. And I stopped for 6 months and then picked it back up in September of 2017. I don't know what triggered me to start up again, but 2018 was horrendous. Gambled every single day, had no control. Didn't want to do it, but my brain just wouldn't allow me not to. I say this all the time. I had a lot of health issues, and I think I was just trying to escape all my health issues that were going on at the time. And I was actually in physical rehab, learning how to walk again and sit up on my own and all that stuff. Yet all the energy that I was spending that should have been spent by rehabbing and getting rest and all that kind of stuff, I was on my phone until 3:00 in the morning gambling in a rehab hospital. It's kind of very sad. And I lied straight to my dad's face, which was one of the worst things that I've ever done. And I realized on July 31st of 2018, I literally couldn't do this anymore. I was out of money. I had maxed out 2 credit cards, taken a bunch of payday loans. Like, I was in serious trouble financially. And finally came forward to my dad. And he's been in recovery. He was in the meetings for 25 years, so he understands it.
Wow.
And he immediately said, okay, let's talk about everything. And he kept pushing me until I told him everything. And he said, okay, let's go tell your husband. I was like, no, he's going to divorce me. And he goes, no, he's not, and if he does, then we'll deal with it. But, let's go tell him. And he said, I'm going to leave when I think you're ready to continue the conversation. So I was bawling my eyes out the whole time. And I'm sitting down next to my husband, and my dad goes, John, I've had a trouble with gambling in the past, which I don't know if he really ever talked about it with him. And he's like, okay. And he goes, your wife, who doesn't show any emotions, is bawling her eyes out sitting next to you. She has something to talk to you about. Gets up and leaves my house. Just like leaves and lets me do the rest of the conversation. So that was, I expected maybe a little bit more leeway, but he was like, okay, I'm done. So got to talk to my husband, and my dad took me to my first GA meeting in person the following Tuesday. And it was an open meeting, and the woman that runs the meeting is my sponsor. And as we were leaving the meeting, my dad goes, I like her. She's going to be your sponsor one day. And 30 days later, I asked her to be my sponsor. And I now run that meeting, and found Jeff's group back in, I want to say like April or May of 2020. And that's been a huge part of my recovery too. Being able to do podcasts, starting the Gambling Got the Girls podcast, thanks to Brian, with the support, and just kind of starting to get my story out there and teach other people about gambling addiction, but the positives of gambling recovery, and how much more life can be, how much more you can get out of life in recovery than you ever got while you were gambling. So I love what I do. I love being able to talk to people and help people. I'm not afraid to share my story anymore. I'm not embarrassed about it anymore. And I'm excited to be on here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Now, as a woman stepping into recovery, when you first stepped into recovery, were you finding, I mean, you talk about the woman that was in your group, but were you finding a lot of women talking about their own stories, their, just talking about this addiction in general?
No, I am one of, I think maybe 2 or 3 women who go to my one meeting on Thursday nights down here in Jersey. The other meeting is more women, but I also find that it's older women. It's not my age, my generation, our generation. So relating to them was a little bit different. And a lot of them went to the casinos. I was online. So finding that connection with females, that not only females in recovery, but females with the online addiction, because it is a little bit different. It was very difficult. And I've found some of those people now, including some of the people in the group. But it was difficult in the beginning. I think it's becoming more frequent now, but certainly in the beginning, I mean, I don't think there were many women in Jeff's group in the beginning. And now, you see at least 3, 4 females on the meetings. It's exciting to see that recovery is not just these, as some people put it, these 70-year-old men with mortgages, or, with grandkids and no mortgages anymore, that it's, all these generations, and it doesn't discriminate. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing now, seeing all the women in recovery, is that it doesn't discriminate.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important for voices like yours to share your story. And especially, because I am seeing more and more people with online gambling. And I don't think that the numbers that show women gambling are correct, because it's so much easier to hide it now, to be able to sit on your couch or in your recovery bed or, wherever, gambling online. It's just like, how many women out there put their children to bed and then go sit on the couch and gamble the rest of the night away. And I think it's just so important to talk about this so that we can bring awareness to those women, bring our stories to those women, and help hopefully prevent them from going down the same roads that we did. And I also want to say thanks for even suggesting that I could be in your generation. So,
We are not that far apart.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
If you hear a screaming child in the background, that's mine.
Okay.
Oh.
Mine's just a cat.
Danielle, talking about Gambling Got the Girls. you absolutely have my support, but you started that podcast simply because of who you are. I, as Christina pointed out 2 episodes ago, am a dude. And I realized that myself. And I was like, I need somebody else to come on here and talk about this who is not a dude. And I had met you and Tiffany. And first of all, your rapport with each other was magical. And so there was that. You guys were friends. You went to recovery together. And then when you both could wax poetic about your addiction, it just made perfect sense. So that was 100% you guys. I just, edited it. You know what I mean? So I'm so happy that you guys started it and did it and continue to do it when you find the time. It's a wonderful podcast that everyone should check out. And I'm sure by now we flashed the artwork for it.
All right. Yeah, it's definitely something that, something that I never really knew about was podcasts prior to getting into to sharing my story on your podcast, Brian, originally. And then starting to do I think we were doing like a Wednesday night meeting podcast, basically. But it's something that was not part of my recovery, that I just never even knew what podcasts were. I felt like I was living under a rock. And then all of a sudden, all these podcasts come out, and I was like, okay. And to be able to have a podcast with the female perspective, talked a lot about like female sponsorship. Because a lot of people do recommend the females have female sponsors, males have male sponsors, only because you share some personal information. And personally, I would not have felt comfortable sharing some information with the men, even though I look up to these guys. Like they're, a lot of them are like my dad's age and everything like that, or my grandfather's age. But I have so much respect for these men, especially the ones in my Thursday night meetings that have been there with me since the beginning. But there's just some stuff you don't always feel comfortable saying. Yeah. So the fact that we were able to address something like that, I think was really important, because it's not something that's really talked about very much.
Can I bring up a subject that if you have no experience with it, that's okay. But I know that Christina does have experience with it. And you sort of alluded to it a little bit with the male to male, female to female. You can't share everything with the male. There's also aspects in the room and online, as I've learned, there's the guys who overstep and some who are downright creepy, but guys who definitely overstep when it's a male to female interaction within the recovery setting. You don't have to tell me that you've had these experiences. Have you witnessed these experiences? You understand what I'm saying, or are you oblivious to any of this going on?
I've not personally experienced it, but I know one of the people that I sponsor experienced it significantly in her group, with a male overstepping and also just coming off as a little bit sexually inappropriate. And it really turned her off from the meeting itself. And I think it's something that, she's always well dressed. And so which doesn't have any excuse for this gentleman saying anything, but It almost felt like he could. And there's not a place for that in the meetings and in recovery. And I think it's something that probably happens. Unfortunately, it probably happens more than we hear about it. But I think it's important to recognize that it is out there, but it's also overall extremely uncommon. So we don't want to say don't go to meetings just because you may experience this. You know what I mean? You want to be able to go and for me, the in-person meetings are important. They give me a lot of interaction that I need, human interaction. But I don't want to ever discourage someone just because it could be out there. But it's also important to step up and say something, and also have people that you can talk to about it if it does happen. I don't know if I
Absolutely.
made sense.
It made perfect sense.
Women who have had some experiences. For me, and I just want to apologize for all the noise going on. My cat woke up today and chose violence. So for me, when it came to Most of my stuff is online. Like I get a lot of like, I think it was last week I had like one too many, and it's just like if I don't respond to somebody, I always know when somebody reaches out to me, whether they're reaching out to me for help or whether they're reaching out to me to be inappropriate. I can always tell within the first sentence. And when I don't respond, then they get really, really mean and hateful and those kinds of things. But I think a lot of these groups, a lot of these meetings, they have protocols, like if somebody does make you feel uncomfortable, definitely tell somebody, because if they don't know what's going on, they can't stop it. They can't fix it. And it will end up deterring other people from going in. But definitely, if you don't feel comfortable telling somebody in the meeting, go outside the meeting and call the GA hotline or something like that and report it that way. There's a lot of ways around it, because these groups can be so healing. They can be great. The men in my GA group are wonderful. I've never had a bad experience with them. And they generally care about the women that are in these groups. But I'm going to take this one step further on this question about the male-female sponsorship, that type of thing. And I really just hope they focus in on Brian's face on this. But one thing that women connect more with is that we have the whole other emotion of like the monthly cycles and those types of things, and that whole emotional roller coaster of that. So
right,
that's not something that you can feel comfortable talking to men. Yeah, I really wanted to get like a very uncomfortable look on him.
I was holding strong, and you got me.
But if you think about it, it's such an emotional thing anyway. And then women have to battle the whole, the whole monthly just ups and downs that we have normally. And so, yeah, that's something that I think it's imperative why it's good for women to be sponsored with other women.
No, I totally see that. I would never argue that, especially when you bring it up in that way. I'm like, yep, whatever you say on that is gospel, and that's what we will stick to.
But do you see people talking about that in regular recovery, like situations in all your years of recovery? Has that conversation ever come up, or have you seen it in your own just recovery world? Like
the conversation of a monthly cycle or something to do with that. And I feel like I've had women mention PMS in groups in a way that, just sort of offhandedly, that was on top of everything else. There was this as well, on top of everything else, I had PMS at the same time. I believe I've heard that in a meeting, but not, I don't think in the way that you're describing it.
But some women, I have had friends who have actually had to go be medicated the week before because their emotions were so strong. And so it's like when you're already trying to fight this battle and step into recovery, your emotions are already all over the place. And then you add that in, it's like people just don't talk about it, and that's something that I think needs to be talked about in the conversation, and why maybe women sometimes they struggle so much in the beginning.
It's interesting, Christina, that you brought that up, because now I'm sitting here thinking, as you guys know, not everyone out there, obviously, but as someone who's, about 4.5 months along in my first pregnancy, thank goodness, I can't believe it.
Yay.
Thanks. The emotional roller coaster that I am still on with the change in hormones, I just wonder if people who are not in recovery and who are still, battling active addiction, if they're going through that ultimate huge swing in hormones. I'm telling you, if I was in active addiction, I think I would have been in a worse spot because of my change in my mood. I already have mental health issues. I'm not afraid to say it. I have depression. I have anxiety to the point where I get panic attacks sometimes out of nowhere. So I think that had something to do with my escapism and feeling like I just wanted to escape all those issues. But then I sit here going, I can yell at my husband for something that's really stupid, or I can cry at every video that comes up on Facebook, and that's normally not me. But I would wonder if there's anyone out there that, if that does make a difference when they're still, unfortunately, in active addiction. And does it make a difference if it's in the beginning of your recovery? Are you able to handle all of the emotions that you're already getting from stopping gambling? And then you add all these other emotions to it. Brian, I know you obviously can't answer that question, but my brain just started thinking. So I figured I'd bring it up.
I think it's a good point that I never thought about for sure.
Well, because and like I said, I think because there's still not a lot of women talking like openly about it. But if you think about it, I mean, I wish like maybe somebody who's watching this and who's still kind of being pulled back in, maybe like chart the pulls and things like that. Because if you think about it, if you can have a week where you're just like, I'm done, and you're strong and you're okay and your emotions are okay, but then a whole nother week and everything can just, it can all just go to shit. So it's like, I think if people start kind of maybe being aware of where they're at, then maybe they can kind of get ahead of those kind of emotions, like, prepare for them. They're coming, like, what can we do kind of thing.
Well, I think that's important overall in recovery. When you first get into recovery, I don't know about you guys, but I was actually worse off mentally the first week that I entered recovery, and it wasn't because I had stopped gambling. It was because I had recognized all of the problems that I had caused and the lack of trust that ended up happening in my relationship, which thank goodness is now fixed. But that's because I've been active in my recovery. But I'd say about 5 days after I stopped is when I hit my low from a mental health perspective. And I think it was just because everything hit me all at once. So to know that it's okay if your mental health, just because you stopped, your mental health may not be as good, but it will come back. And it may not be as good because, yes, we cause problems, whether it be in our own personal lives, with other people. Some people get in trouble with the law. But if we stop the bleeding, as my dad said to me, you stop the bleeding. Now let's start healing. He actually wanted to celebrate after I told him all the money that I lost. And I was like, how can you celebrate right now? I don't understand. But his idea was that, like, we stopped it. Okay. Now we move forward. And I think that was really important for me because it was around that time that I was just so bad mentally. But I was able to get out of that because I saw the positive in recovery, and I saw people. My sponsor has 19 years coming up next month. February 18th of 2003 was her last bet. So she has 19 years coming up next month. When I first came in, she was at 15 and a half, probably. That's a lot of recovery. And so I saw that from the beginning. But I think it's also important that people with, like Christina, you don't even have a year yet, but you sound like you have 15 years of recovery. So it's also important to be able to listen to the person and not just look at the actual years that they have, because that right there could be a huge difference.
Yeah. And I was saying that last week, stop the bleeding, start the healing. You got to stop the bleeding to start the healing. Yeah, I like that. And it's very true with that. Now I come across this thing. Sorry, Brian, if you had a question. 3 stages of a relapse. Okay. So the first stage is going to be emotional, which is why we're talking about emotional. The second stage is going to be mental. And the third stage is going to be physical. So in the first stage, which is emotional, that's when you've got your triggers, you've got your stressors, you've got your things that are just like you emotionally want to run from, then you go into the mental stage of it, where you start trying to talk yourself into, oh, I can do this. It's been a while, or I can go one time, it'll be fine, because you're trying to find ways to avoid the emotional. Or, like it's been a while, I can control it. It's fine. Nobody will know, that kind of thing. And then you go into the third stage, which is physical. And that's where you act and you step back into the cycle and cement your relapse there. So when we talk about the emotional, we can stop a relapse in step one if we just deal with the emotional, right? So what are some of the things that have helped you? Because our lives don't necessarily change when we step into recovery. We still have issues. We still have things come up. What are some things that have helped you get through those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the gentlemen from my Sunday groups says when life gets lifey, right? Like life doesn't just stop just because we entered recovery. I've had some tough times since I entered recovery. I lost my mentor. I lost a friend. Both passed away within the first 6 months of my recovery. And I've gone through a lot of different things. I had major life-changing and life-saving surgery. And all those things I would have wanted to just escape from. I would have wanted to just run away. And the biggest thing that helped me was just going to meetings. It's going to sound like cliche, but it really, I was in a meeting the night I found out my friend died. And I was actually walking into the meeting when I got the phone call. And we knew she was on hospice. Like we knew it was happening, but just hearing it, obviously, it was very hard. And I called my parents and I let them know. And they're like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "I'm at a meeting, but I'm going to go home. Like, I'm not staying here." They're like, "Yes, you are." Because my parents are both in recovery of their own aspects. They've both been in 12-step programs. And they're like, "No, you need to be at the meeting right now." I was like, "I don't want to be. I don't want to be. I want to go home." And I stayed. And it was the best decision I could have ever made because the support group that I had around me, they all knew what was going on. So they kind of knew when I walked in crying, they knew exactly what was going on. But they were so supportive of me. And just having that support system was huge. And then being willing to actually talk about my feelings and actually learning how to actually put a word to how I was actually feeling, because for so long I didn't feel anything. So I was escaping from all of my feelings that I was just numb. I didn't even know. Sometimes I still go like, what is this emotion? What is it? How do I describe it? And sometimes it's anxiety or sometimes it's sadness, but I still struggle to put the words to it sometimes because I just tossed it away for so long. So talking about it for me, and then my mom and I will have mini meetings on the phone all the time, which is kind of nice. And she'll always say like, "Oh, what does Linda say?" Linda's my sponsor. Like, "What does Linda think about this?" And I'm like, "I should call her." I think I'm more of a texter than a phone call person. But just reaching out to the people around me. And then when I had my surgery, it was the support of everyone. My sponsor drove an hour and a half to see me in the hospital. I had no idea she was coming. The support that I was getting from everyone was, it was a very dangerous surgery. It wasn't a walk in the park, and the support there. So I would say having that support system, going to meetings, and just being willing to actually talk, were three of the biggest things to help me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Danielle, we have a pretty solid trigger warning on this show. So I just want to know, what were you playing in the casino?
I was blackjack on my phone and slots on my phone. And then I was poker on Borgata's poker website, which is a casino down in Atlantic City. And also the World Series of Poker, like Poker Stars.
Do you remember the slot machine that you played?
I played a lot of them, but I really liked this Hercules one at the end.
Oh, okay.
I think it was from Golden Nugget, and I like this. It was one where it was like Midas Gold or something like that. So like it would take you into these reels, and then you could get more money if like it turned gold or something like that. That was the one that actually got me hooked. That was when I started like having my downfall.
I recognize
I thought I could beat the algorithm for blackjack, because there's an algorithm that's set up in the phone or on blackjack to if you don't know how to play it right, you're going to lose. And I thought I figured it out, and I had figured it out, but then I'd screw up so many times and get too overzealous and be like, I got this. And then I'd screw it up and lose all my money.
Do you find yourself still thinking about Hercules from time to time?
I feel
And
like I had
second part of that is, do you get urges?
I don't get urges. Triggers are absolutely there, like we just talked about. I don't get urges. I haven't really had any urges for probably almost 3.5 years. Probably within the first month, I definitely had some urges, but they've generally gone away. Every once in a while, if the lottery comes up, like the Mega Millions or the Powerball, I ended with scratch offs. Like that was a problem for me at the end. So every once in a while, I like think about it, but I don't have that like itch to do it. And I think it's because I really hit rock bottom for me. And my rock bottom was definitely not other people's rock bottoms, but it was enough for me to realize that like I had created so many problems and I just wanted a better life. And I said this in Christina's podcast a couple weeks ago. My parents, at my 2-year anniversary, they come to every year celebration, and we'll have a little baby at the 4-year celebration. But my parents came to my 2-year, and my mom said everyone calls me Danny. So they're like, Danny 1.0 was prior to addiction. I was a good person. I really was. Had some mental health issues still, but I was a good person. And then Danny 1.5 was during addiction. And I still was a good person. I just wasn't ever a present person. Like I was there, but I wasn't really actually there. That makes sense, because my brain was somewhere else. And then Danny 2.0 is in recovery. And they always said that Danny 2.0 is better than the other two combined, because I have changed my life around. And it's a blessing to have them be able to see that. And it's a blessing for my husband to be able to see it. But it really, when they said that, it hit me like, oh, wow, I have changed. But I also have to recognize that I have a lifetime ahead of me. I can't just stop. If I don't go to meetings, I will go back. I'm not shy to say that. I know it would happen. So I need to be in some form of meeting at least once a week. And when I had my surgery, I had 2 weeks without a meeting. I wasn't in Jeff's group yet. And I was trying to recover from a very major surgery, so it didn't really cross my mind. But you find yourself start slipping back into your old ways of thinking when you're not at meetings, or at least I do.
Thank you for sharing your mental health struggles. As somebody who 4 months ago found out I too have mental health struggles, anxiety, depression, and was suicidal, did an inpatient stay for that. So I just wanted to mention that because you mentioned it. And I always think it's important for people who can to mention that, so everybody knows that it's okay to reach out for help. So thank you for sharing your mental health struggles.
Definitely. I was never one to admit to it. I mean, I've been in a therapist since I was 18. And been dealing with depression and anxiety since I was 16. I was suicidal twice. Once after I entered recovery, those first couple of days, but then also back in 2011. And, I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to go to a therapist. And then once I did, I started in such a low spot, and I still work with that therapist today. I took about 1.5 years off to do some, I have severe PTSD, but I took about 1.5 years off to do that. And when I came back to him, I always say, like, I came to you in like said I was one of the worst possible depression patients he's ever seen. And now, I'm in such a good spot, and I credit so much of it. Obviously it's hard work, but so much of it's my recovery. Like, my mental health has done a 180 since coming into recovery. And I'm not going to sit here and say I don't have bad days. That's a lie. I do. But I know how to handle them now. I didn't handle them before. So I think, like you said, it's important to recognize that is out there. And there's still a stigma out there about mental health. Mental health and addiction, to me, go hand in hand. so many people have dual diagnosis between addiction and mental health. And I think there just needs to be more people out there talking about it, because there's no need to be stigmatized, but there's still a stigma out there.
Thank you for saying all that.
Thank you. We appreciate you so much coming on, sharing your story. I know it's late there for you. And is there any parting words of wisdom you'd like to give anybody who is watching?
First of all, thank you for having me on. Yes, it is late for me, but still got a couple hours of work to do, honestly. But what would I say as parting words of wisdom? Oh my goodness. I would say that no matter how bad, if you're still in active addiction, if there's anyone out there that's listening to this that's still in active addiction, no matter how bad your life is right now, you can be better. It can be better if you just stop gambling. And my dad has always said this, because he gambled. He had that dream world of the compulsive gambler. He always thought he wanted all these big things. He has all those big things now, and it's because he doesn't gamble. And that always hit me pretty strong. Like, we wanted everything, but we can get everything if we're in recovery. And I think we're all living proof of that. So
well said.
My parting words.
Well said. You can check out the Gambling Got the Girls podcast. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on being pregnant. That is awesome. We are happy for you. For Christina, I'm Brian. This was the Bet Free Life. Talking helps.
Oh, you're going to go digital. Okay.
Ah!
Right. We are upgrading.